Welcome to the It's in Queens podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and this is the only podcast that focuses on my borough of Queens. This podcast presents Queens as a destination with something for everyone who lives here, works here, or wants to visit. And it comes to you each week thanks to the Queens Tourism Council and the Queens Economic Development Corporation. Now, this time of year, many of us start dreaming about an escape to warmer climates. While Queens has a wealth of activities, events, and destinations year-round, the idea of a sunny getaway often comes to mind. That said, winter is also the perfect time to rediscover the borough. From warm and inviting cultural institutions to delicious meals from every corner of the globe, Queens offers endless opportunities for a staycation. Now, today's guest, Mark Chesnut, knows a thing or two about travel. He's an international traveler and a seasoned travel journalist, and he shares incredible stories about his adventures around the globe. But as much as he's explored far-flung destinations, Mark also treasures his home borough of Queens. And during our conversation, which I'll bring to you in just a moment, I really wanted to uncover what he loves most about the borough, what inspires him locally, and what spots he thinks every Queens resident should explore. Queens offers so much that you can explore, whether it's a hidden gem of a restaurant, a unique cultural experience, or a beautiful outdoor space. And if you are considering a staycation, there is no better time than now to experience all that Queens has to offer right in your own backyard. Now, a little about Mark. He is a journalist, editor, consultant, and public speaker with more than 3 decades of experience. He's the 2019 winner of the NLGJA Excellence in Travel Writing Award, and he's authored the book Prepare for Departure: Notes on a Single Mother, A Misfit Son, Inevitable Mortality, and the Enduring Allure of Frequent Flyer Miles. Mark also operates his own travel blog, departurelevel.com, and works with a variety of travel industry clients on custom and branded content. And his writing has appeared in a number of publications, such as Forbes Travel Guide, Global Traveler, Travel and Leisure Mexico, and many more. And he's also spoken at prestigious conventions like the New York Times Travel Show and the Tennessee Williams and New Orleans Literary Festival. So let's bring him on. Mark Chesnut, welcome to the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start off with your memoir, Prepare for Departure. It intertwines personal narratives with your passion for travel. What inspired you to blend these two aspects of your life into a single story?
Well, my book is the story about journeys that families sometimes must take together. And in my case, it's about the final months of my mother's life and how she and I dealt with that. But it's also a funny book. And it tells the story of my mother's life and our life together, and as well as how we both dealt with growing up together, kind of. So the more I wrote and the further back in time I went, I realized that the book is also a story about how much of an effect parents can have on their children, often in a good way, ideally in a good way. So travel has always been one of my passions, and my mother always supported and encouraged me to follow my passions. So really that's where the connection comes in this book. So in many ways, it's thanks to her that I'm a travel writer. It's thanks to her that I'm a writer in general. And so that's a big part of the story. And then there's obviously the double entendre of the title, Prepare for Departure, because it is about preparing for the end of life, but it's also about preparing for the next stages in our own lives, as well as the various journeys that we might take.
So I follow you on social media and I get jealous every single time I see photos, especially during the winter, the colder months where you're in a pool, for instance, which is one of the more recent ones that I saw. But reflecting on your extensive travels, I'd love for you to share a particular experience that significantly influenced your perspective on life or writing.
Well, some of the trips that most influenced me and set the tone for my life or my working life were when I was little. So they're not even that impressive a trip. They're not glamorous, but traveling every year with my mother for the first 17 years of my life, from Western New York State, where I was born and raised, to Kentucky, where the rest of my family was from. That basically set the stage for me. It kind of gave me the travel bug, essentially, at a very early age. I started flying and I started taking car trips before I even remembered I was a baby. So I learned early that travel can be a freeing experience. It can be educational, transformative. Obviously, it can get you away from cold weather for a while too. And it can be really exciting, even if you're only flying into Paducah, Kentucky. And then, of course, since then, I've gone on a lot much longer trips. Some of my earliest long distance trips I took when I was alone in my early 20s. I went to places in South America and in Asia, and that really helped me also to open my eyes even more to the world and to see how it feels to travel alone, to see how it feels to meet new people and learn new things, and to kind of, I guess, conquer our own personal new frontiers or our fears. So all of those have really played a part in making me who I am today.
So, could you discuss a memorable cultural experience from one of your travels that left a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, there's been so many and in a lot of different ways. As anyone who travels, even if you just travel to one state across, there's so many possibilities. But one of the most interesting and emotional cultural experiences took place when I was traveling to several different locations to interview former leprosy patients, and it's now called Hansen's disease, and it's a treatable condition. But a few years ago, I visited several former communities that the United States government had established decades ago, back when isolation was required. So I visited places in Hawaii, Louisiana, and Panama, and Central America. And in each place, I interviewed these former patients, and several of whom were still residents in the places where they'd been forced to live for many, many years. So it was such a moving and important experience for me, I feel. And I loved being able to give these people a chance to tell their stories because the people like that are so important. We don't always hear much about people who go through things like this, and we can all learn so much from them. So that's one of the things that kind of stands out in my mind. It was very different from most of my travels, but it really meant a lot to me.
You've traveled the globe, but this podcast focuses on Queens, and I'm always encouraging people to travel across the borough. Now, you're a resident of Jackson Heights, so let's start there. What aspects of the neighborhood do you find most inspiring, particularly in comparison to other places you visited?
Right. Oh, I love Jackson Heights, as I'm sure you already know, and you do too. I love Queens. It's just so international. It's so diverse. And even though, I do travel a lot and I've been to Asia and Africa and Europe and Latin America, it's really, really difficult to find anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States, as internationally diverse as Queens. I think it's impossible, right? And especially here in Jackson Heights, we're kind of in one of the hot spots for international diversities. And so I really love that just in my neighborhood, you can walk 2 blocks down the street on any given afternoon, and you can pass by one person wearing a sari, one person wearing a burqa, a gay couple holding hands, a Buddhist monk, a transgender person, people speaking several different languages. And it's all just so completely normal for us living here, and nobody looks twice at anybody. I think we're like a microcosm of the planet. Queens is, Jackson Heights is, and it's really proof of how we can all get along and how tolerant we can all be. So it's really a beautiful environment, isn't it?
How has living in Queens influenced your work as a travel writer and author?
In a very basic way, it's influenced my work as a travel writer because getting to LaGuardia is so easy and fast, and I love the LaGuardia Link bus. So I'm a big proponent of that. Now, on a deeper level, if we want to get deeper, I definitely has exposed me to more different kinds of people, more cultures, more foods, different kinds of cuisine. I think living in Queens is kind of like traveling because you can experience so many different things from all around the world, in your own part of Queens, or if you just venture one neighborhood or two neighborhoods over. So I think anyone who lives in Queens, I think we're lucky in a lot of ways because it really is enriching and it's an enriching experience, and it can help our understanding and spark it. In my case, it sparks my creativity, and it makes me want to get out and visit the places where all these people are from that are all around the borough too.
So, I would love for you to share with our listeners some of your recommendations, a favorite restaurant or two, a cultural destination you like here in Queens.
Well, there's so many things. I'm in love with momos. So I love the momos that they sell from a truck on Broadway, and I cannot remember the name, of course, but it's on Broadway right near Roosevelt. But I know there's several other places, and there's the Momo Crawl, which is incredible and attracts so many people. But momos are one of my go-to favorites. So kind of anywhere you can get them, I recommend the momos. I also love Thai cuisine, and there's a lot of really good Thai restaurants. Like in Jackson Heights, there's Kitchen 79, which I really like. And then in Elmhurst, one of the most famous, I think, is Spicy Shallot. There's really just really, really good Thai food in Elmhurst and also in Jackson Heights and other areas. In terms of cultural offerings, there's I really like the Museum of the Moving Image is great. I think MoMA PS1, that's a great space for art and culture. And I also really love, as many people do, the Flushing Meadows Corona Park and the Queen's Museum. And one thing I've loved doing is I like reading up about the World's fairs that took place in that park. And then I even have a book that I bought on eBay really cheap that shows like the map of what was where. And I love walking around that park and like just imagining what it was like when all the structures, all the buildings were still there. And when you have one of those old maps, you can actually see, all right, well, here was this pavilion. And it's really interesting piece of history.
Is there a specific place or two in Queens that you feel is or are underappreciated and deserve more attention?
I think, in a way, based on my own experience, I think where we live in the Jackson Heights Historic District is kind of a lesser known area of Queens for a lot of New Yorkers. Because, I can say personally, before I moved to Jackson Heights in 2002, I'd lived in Brooklyn, I'd lived in Manhattan, and I'd visited Jackson Heights and Queens, obviously a lot, but I'd only known the business section of Jackson Heights, which is bustling and hectic and it can be crowded and it's exciting. But I didn't know what was just a couple blocks away, the historic district, which is landmarked and everything. So it wasn't until my husband and I started looking around that we discovered the historic district and we were like, wow, it's just amazing. The architecture is so cool. It's unlike any other neighborhood. And I'm really glad now that, I do see like walking tours, architecture tours, and foodie tours of this area. So it can help to educate more people to see, all the good stuff that's here.
I want to come back to your writing. For anyone who might be listening who is an aspiring travel writer, you've probably learned a lot of lessons over the years. Give some advice for someone who is considering becoming a travel writer.
Well, my first piece of advice, I think, would be to get some clips, and that means writing samples. Because in order to get some work, you got to show what you can do, even if you haven't completely done it, on the level that you want to. So, for example, for me, I was working in other kinds of publishing and writing, and I wanted to be a travel writer. This is decades ago, and the time flies. But in order to get myself established, I had to be able to show that I could write travel stuff. So my first real gig was a freelance gig, but it was unpaid. I didn't get paid, but I wrote a monthly travel column for a tiny Manhattan newspaper that no longer exists. And nowadays, I think it's a little bit easier, actually. So people now have it easier in a way in terms of breaking in because you can establish yourself and expose your work to more people more easily because everything's online. So you could
Hmm.
create your own travel blog, or you could write for someone else's small travel blog, even if you don't get paid to start. Once you have the samples, then you can contact editors, you can contact, magazines or websites that are your dream places to write for.
So, how do you balance the personal and professional aspects of travel so that you can ensure that your journeys are both fulfilling and productive?
That can be tricky sometimes, as like when anyone travels, I think, there can be some stress, it can be exciting and great, but it also can be tiring and all that. So um I think that's, in a way, it's easier to balance things now because we're constantly connected and you're on your phone, you can be in, I was just in Thailand and I was on my cell phone or whatever. But in a way, that makes it harder at the same time for the same reason, because we're always connected to back home. We're always connected to work. You can check your work emails even if you're not working. So I definitely spend less time in front of my laptop when I'm traveling because it's important to be out there and experiencing things and learning new things. And also, when I'm exploring, I'm still working because I'm writing about it. But if I'm based somewhere for a while, like in Mexico City, where I often am for more extended periods of time to work, I basically, what helps me is to have a set structure for my time. So I know, like, okay, half the day on Tuesday and Thursday, I need to do nothing but sit in front of my laptop and work. And then on Friday, all day, blah, blah, blah. But then the other time I need to spend exploring. And then obviously you need time to just relax and have good food and have fun too. So I would say that for each individual, we're all different, but like it's important to determine what is the right balance for you in terms of connection versus disconnection with back home, and work versus relaxation and exploring. So figure out what the right balance is and then try to maintain that as close as you can, but be flexible too.
So, what's in your travel itinerary for this year?
I'm really excited about this year, actually. I'm glad you asked that because I'm doing a couple things that are kind of like once in my lifetime kinds of trips. First of all, like later this month, my next trip, I'm going to New Orleans, which is one of my favorite cities in the United States. It's so unique and so cool. And I'm going to be donating a collection of my father's World War II documents and letters and photographs to the National World War II Museum, which is a great facility there. It's massive. And so then in May, as a follow up to that, my husband and I, Angel and I, will be flying to Germany to attend a special event at the very site where my father, who would be 107 years old this month. I was born when he was old, so I'm only 60, but he would be 107. But anyway, they're doing an event to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE Day, which is when Europe was liberated during at the very end of World War II. So we're going to be there on that site, and I think it's going to be really interesting and a moving experience. And I'll be writing about that too. So super excited. Aside from those trips that are kind of unique for me, I'll be continuing to travel regularly to various parts of Mexico and the Caribbean because those are my two main beats for my regular travel writing. And there'll definitely be other trips coming up too throughout the year, some of which I don't know about yet. So it's always fun to see, what comes along as the months progress.
And I'm going to have to pick your brain before my husband and I get out of town for some ideas. I'll definitely be in touch with you on that. Before I let you go, Mark, please let our listeners know where they can go if they want to learn more about you and find out more about your book, Prepare for Departure.
Yeah, so thank you so much for asking for that too. Probably the best way for people to follow me is on Instagram. That's my main platform. And you can find me as departure underscore level. So it's departure level, but with the underscore underneath. And I also have my own travel blog site, which strangely enough is also called it's departurelevel.com with no underscore. So you can follow me at, departurelevel.com or travel or on Instagram at departure underscore level. And on both places, I share travel tips and things like hotel and airline reviews and reports and from and all kinds of good stuff that I hope will make other people's trips go more smoothly too. And stuff about Queens too. I like posting stuff about Queens.
Well, of course, we all do that. Mark Chesnut, thank you so much for appearing here on the It's in Queens podcast.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
As much as Queens is known for its diversity and credible offerings, I often find myself rediscovering the gems that make this borough so special. For instance, Flushing Meadows Corona Park is one of my go-to spots. It's not just the expansive green space or the Unisphere that captivates me, but the sheer variety of activities that are available, from kayaking on Meadow Lake to catching a Mets game or exploring the Queens Museum or Queens Theater. There is always something new to experience, no matter the season. Another favorite of mine, of course, is the food scene right here in Jackson Heights where I live. Walking down Roosevelt Avenue or 37th Avenue really feels like traveling the world in just a few blocks. From Colombian arepas to Tibetan momos, it really is a culinary adventure, and it showcases the global flavors of Queens. Now, if you're looking for something tasty to have or an activity to experience, well, I've got you covered. Every week, Rob Mackay drops into this podcast. He's with the Queens Economic Development Corporation and Queens Tourism Council, and each and every week he highlights some of the more exciting events that are happening in Queens.
Well, hello, Jeff. We got something really quite cool coming up on Friday, January 31st, and it actually has a direct tie to this podcast. Zulu African acrobats will perform at Lexington Center in East Elmhurst. Lexington Center is the school for the deaf near Bulliva Center. It has a nice little performance space there. The Zulu African acrobats are incredible. They all are graduates from the Baba Watoto School of Performing Arts, and they really do define gravity, define anatomy, define physics, all that kind of stuff. They do human pyramids, they do dish spinning and stick balance, they do crazy contortions and chair balance, juggling, unicycling, all that kind of stuff. Poleaxe, hoop diving, and comedy. They're quite funny. And last but not least, this is the first big show organized by the Queens Culture and Art Network, also known as QCAN. Any listener to this podcast would know that that's a brand new nonprofit organization promoting the arts in the entire borough and based out of the Variety Boys and Girls Club in Astoria. And of course, you interviewed Susan Agan, the brand new executive director, just a few weeks ago. All right, Jeff, hope to see you soon. Thanks.
That's just a few of the things that are happening in our borough, and the place to go to discover everything that's on the horizon is at itsinqueens.com. And by the way, if you're interested in more business news, well then head over to the Queens Economic Development Corporation's website at queensny.org. And when you're there, sign up for their newsletter. You can also sign up for the newsletter at itsinqueens.com. And when you visit any place in Queens this winter, snap a photo or two and share them with us. Make sure to use the hashtag #It'sInQueens when you post on Instagram or X. Your photo could become our photo of the week. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and that's it for this week's It's in Queens podcast.